Tackling time against terrorists in Nigeria. Thank you, Ibrahim Dan Hamidu, for that background report. Now, joining us for discussion on that topic, let me introduce in the studio Dr. Kabil Adamu. He's a security risk management expert. Is here as usual. Dr. Adamu, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Also, we have Abutu Yaro, retired AIG Zone 13, former CD Edo, CP Edo, Zamfara and Imo State, a CP Federal Operations Commander and Counterterrorism Training School, Port Harcourt. AIG Yaro, you are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good to have you again.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Victor.
All right. Let me also welcome via Zoom from Jos, General John Temlong, who is the first commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force, a former president, Alumni Association of National Defense College, and who is also a security consultant. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you, General, for joining us. Okay, let's kickstart our conversation this morning by establishing the origin of this new terrorist group. Dr. Adamu, from the report there, we gathered that the community actually noted their activities around 2017, which they reported to the law enforcement agencies, but the profiling that was done did not, give any, report of any danger, forthcoming. But looking at the objectives of this, group, we have found out that they are dangerous. All right. So how does this group, differ from the existing terrorist group like Boko Haram and others?
Thank you very much. I think your correspondent captured the issue when he used the word radicalization. There are groups that are itinerant, and even by their name, a lot of studies have been conducted, and the studies have narrowed down to suggest that the name Lakurawa is derived from a French word that speaks to attempt to recruit. In other words, those who are attempting to recruit. And so it's very possible that this were a group of itinerant persons who were involved in proselytization, preaching the version of Islam that they understood. And then along the way, they became radicalized. Now, what is radicalization? Radicalization is adopting a version of a faith that promotes and encourages violence. And so procuring weapons, acquiring weapons, and then using force to either convert or in certain instances to instill the type of administration that they believe is the better one than the one that exists in the certain communities. Now, from history, we know that because of the porous border between Nigeria and the countries surrounding us, if we narrow down on Niger Republic alone, the borderline is about 1,400 kilometers between Nigeria and Niger. Now, over time, historically, there has been movement between Nigeria and Niger, between Niger and Nigeria, sometimes for legal purposes, other times for illegal purposes. Okay. Now, it's specific reference to this group. It appears they used to come either for hardened purposes or for ideological purposes to preach religion, or sometimes to markets that exist in those locations, running from all the way from Kebbi to Jigawa. There are several markets, international markets, that so along the way, it's very possible that this group became radicalized. There are so many moving parts to this story. A lot of research is ongoing at the moment. So it's possible they became radicalized. And why did they become radicalized? Any student of counterterrorism who is looking at the situation in the Sahel region would know that radicalization is a possibility. The two major jihadist groups in the world, which is the Islamic State and the Al-Qaeda. The hotspot for their operations at the moment globally is the Sahel region. And at the last count, there were about 30 groups that are active within this region. And the consequences of the activism of this group has led to at least 2 to 3 coups within that region. Mali, 2 coups in Mali, where security was cited as one of the reasons. Recently, in Niger Republic, security was cited as one of the reasons. Of course, we know what is happening in Burkina Faso at the moment, where about 50% of the country's territory is in the hands of these guys. So once there are groups that are moving around that region and interfacing, as it were, using the same gun-running channels, the same routes that have been established for movement of transhumans and several other activities that they do, then the possibility of interaction between these jihadist groups, the Al-Qaeda that I mentioned, and the Islamic State in West Africa province, as well as the one in Greater Sahara, the possibility of interaction between them and then the consequent de-radicalization is extremely high. So that is possibly where this de-radicalization happened. And then from a benevolent group that was moving around, either for economic purposes or just common proselytization, they became radicalized. And from that radicalization, we started seeing instances of attacks. And just like your correspondent mentioned, there have been several of such instances. In one instance, it was with the community. Then in the most recent instance, it was with the Nigerian security forces. So in terms of origin, their origin is from the Sahel. Most of them are either Tuaregs or the other natives that are domiciled within the Sahel. Of course, over time, they may have recruited from locals within Nigeria. Their activities is bordered around parts of Sokoto State, that especially Tangaza local government, down to parts of Argungu and other local government within Kebbi State.
All right.
Thank you.
Let me thank you for your opening remarks, Dr. Kabir Adamu. At least you've given us an idea of, they were there, they've been there, and our background report suggests it, that they've been there for quite some time, only became radicalized along the way. But let me ask AIG Abutu Yaru, retired, do we have an idea how they came in the first place and for what purpose? Yes, we are beginning to establish they weren't this bad when they came in, but how did they come in? For what purpose did they come in?
Thank you very much. Dr. Kabir has incisively laid out the issues and stake with respect to their emergence on how they come in. We are consolidating of that and we are having the same agreement. But in addition, the narrator or the reporter even mentioned in the earlier reports that this group were known or unknown to the communities within the fringes of Sahara. And initially, there was a kind of invitational treat when some of these communities were having uncontrollable security challenges, like communities in Gudu local government, in Silame local government, and in Tangaza area. Community leaders actually made overtures to some of these people who initially came in aid of improving security in form of enhancing local enforcement, and later religious intonations were introduced, and later compensatory platform in form of taking commodities from the locals, in form of taxation, in form of enforcement, or some strict variant of religious belief became part of it. And naturally, it is expected that if you unwittingly invite elements from distant lands whose orientation and preferences are not really very known to you, only the pretentious outlook is the one that you need as a palliative intervention in your local circumstances, you will certainly lose control. Like a doctor said, these people originally came from the Sahel region. And the Sahel region has become the hotbed of insurgency in Africa or in West Africa, so to speak. We all know the issues surrounding the Sahel, as Doctor said. Our Sahelian, first and the most intimate Sahelian neighbor, Niger, we've been together with them for more than 1,000 years of Nigeria history. Regardless of the colonial invasion of Western Sudan, which is this part of West Africa, in spite of the colonial differentiation, we've been very much together with Niger for more than 1,000 years, so to speak. Of course, majority of people in Niger, they speak our language. And we have the same religious platform, so to speak. So the inflow of persons from Sahel into the fringes of our country is a matter of serious concern. And lately, of course, as some scholars have put it, the fact that in recent time, arising from the political situation in Niger, it has been a little bit difficult for us to have a kind of smoothness, security, convergence activity, which in any case too provided the lacuna for the insurgents of the moment. The point is that the people are here, and it was easy, or it has been easy for them to get here because we have been very contiguous people, so to speak. And when they move around, it is difficult to really see them within the context of strangers completely, when it's strangers in quote, because we are somehow contiguous in terms of cultural affinity. And that is why our relationship with the Sahel must be treated on the first burner. The present trend, whereby most of the Sahelian states of Niger, Mali,
Chad,
and Burkina are moving towards different security direction and political direction, calls for concern. And in the interest of our national security strategy, we need to do a reboot of relationship, particularly with Niger. We need to reboot it for our strategic security interest, because the ravaging insurgents or elements in the Sahel are deeply playing the tough on Niger and Malian territory. If you look at the map of our West Africa, Niger is contiguous to Mali. Mali is contiguous to Burkina Faso. And then we even have one axis we call Le Pacto Goma, which is the central part of the Sahel, whereby all elements of insurgents from different parts of the world, they really incubate there.
Le Pato Guma.
Yes, Le Pacto Goma is the borderline that traverses the borderline of Niger, the borderline of Burkina Faso, and the borderline of Mali. It's a region, it's a regional enclave, Le Pacto Goma. I spell it, Le Pacto, L-I-P-A-T-A-K-O. Then hyphen, Goma, G-O-U-R-M-A. That is the epicenter of Sahelian insurgent breeding arena, which even these three countries are finding it difficult to really control or influence. And the fact too that these are our strategic neighbors are Francophone, and the influence of France in Africa has dwindled. In the sense their presence or cooperation with the Francophone countries has dwindled. It makes the situation to be to be higher than we can really imagine. And it calls for concern. That is the area I believe that as a country, we need to have to reboot our perspective with respect to how we manage this our francophone neighbors, who of course are drifting, and their drifting is going to increase or create more ground for Sahelian insurgents to grow wider and become, and we are going to impact on us much more.
Okay.
So, for now, containment measures are necessary. While internal containment measures is apt, strategic engagement with our Sahelian neighbor as a country is even more relevant. Because if it is not done, the threat we face will come in more unmanageable perspective.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, AIG Yaro, for your opening remarks there. There is need for us to reboot our relationship with some of these countries, and containment measure is very paramount. Let's go to General Tem Long. General, we, just like they have spoken in the studio, we looked at the origin and the objectives of this new terrorist group. And just like AIG said, there is need for the country, Nigeria, the government, to reboot relationship with some of our neighboring countries, especially around the Sahel region. Let's look at the implications of this new terrorist group for national security. What do you think are the implications?
Well, thank you very much. The implication on national security is obvious. You would have seen that the communities where these people are operating already are suffering from the effects of their activities. The communities, the armed security agencies, the armed forces have become under severe attacks from them. And so they are expanding and moving down south. So it's obvious that if they are left unchecked, the whole of Sokoto and Kebbi states will become very much engulfed, the activities. Some local governments already are under their control. So to that extent, they are quite a very serious threat. But what is even more concerning is that it appears we are not learning from history. If you see the origin of how they came in, some of them were actually from some of the literatures that are available so far. Like Kabir said, there's a lot of studies being done on them, but so some of those available already specifies that some of them were invited by some of the herders to protect them, and people were moving anyhow. I remember in 1998, when the National Joint Task Force was established, the northern parts of Borno, Yobe, and some local governments in Borno had gone deliberately across to Niger Republic and recruited the Fulani militia force, the Fulani milice that was set up by the Fulanis in Niger, to help them tackle the activities of the Tubo Arabs, rebels, who are ravaging them because the Nigerian government was not able to protect them. And so to that extent, you could see it repeating itself here. People are coming because of the inadequacy of security in our own environment. And for the fact that when they were there, we had to first of all deal with that threat first. Clear them out of our territory to regain our territorial integrity. So you have the same thing repeating over 20 years ago, people infiltrating in the country, and they are being seen. They said about 2017. What has happened to them? That's the question we should be asking. What happened when we noticed some of these people, even if they are not violent? Because the problem is that the moment you allow foreigners free rein into your country, they can turn into anything. In the first place, they believe in stealth and secrecy. So if they come in, they will come in as friends. They will come in using religion. They will come in using all sorts of things. And that's why I've kept saying that, I've been saying that we must separate national security from religion and from our tribes. Because the question of saying these people are our tribal people, they are our religious people, let's welcome them, and they are foreigners who come in later on and turn against us, forgetting that we are the same religious people, same people of the same tribe, then we must learn to separate these things seriously and start dealing with these situations probably as national security problem. The problem that will bring sentiments of religion and tribe into these things, we have lost it. We must change this scenario. And so it is important that once we notice some of these things happening, we must take decisive action against them. And even those who are collaborating with them, they are known. If you go now and do some proper research, you will identify those who harbor them, those who are using them for their own selfish interests, and those who provides the wherewithal for them. In the first place, when they arrive, they don't live off the land. They live with the people. Some people welcome them. They buy their foods from citizens of Nigeria. They buy medicine for their animals and for themselves within Nigeria. They buy spare parts and petroleum oil and lubricants for their machines from Nigerian market. And also all their requirements, they buy them from people. And everybody in the community will know that these are foreigners. So what have we done about that? And I'm sure there were security operatives embedded in those local governments. What did they do? What action did they take? Did they take anything that is appropriate? If they did, who did they send these reports to? What about the civil authorities that were sent to them? What action did they take? I think we need to start interrogating some of these things and punishing people, sanctioning people, no matter how highly placed they are. Once they play with issues of national security importance, that turns to engulf us and put us in this very bad state. I believe that we need to start putting sanctions in place. The DSS that were there, the police that were there, the civil defense that were there, the immigration and customs staffs were there. Some of them, what happened when this happened? What happened to the reports that came off the line? Did the reports get up to the National Security Advisor, the JIB, and if it got there, what happened? So it's very important that we must start looking at these things. And you see, it's something that we must learn. Like I said, if we don't learn from history, we'll keep reporting history. In 2018, when I was the president of the National, of the alumni of the Association of the National Defense College, we organized a national security seminar with the theme, Fighting Tomorrow's Warfare Today. And we identified that non-state actors are going to split, they are going to mutate, they are going to increase, and they are going to come in their numbers. And the government must step up their game and put up one. Intelligence must be paramount, because at the moment you are able to nip them at the bud, you are able to stop them. But once you allow them to come in and start getting control and gaining followership within the society, it becomes quite difficult for you. We also identified that the Boko Haram group and the rest were going to split into splinters, and they did. We identified also too that what we needed to do was that, like the AIG stated, is that what is our strategic interest with our strategic neighbors? We must continue to redefine it. Look, what are we talking about? Even if our interest supersedes what we think of defending what? If the Nigerian government is a military regime and it is in our own strategic interest to make sure that we collaborate with them for our own national security, we have to. But when we allow them go because we think they are Faria people, they are this thing, the consequent event is what we are having, because they will have unchecked this thing. But thank God, the Chief of Defense Staff, General Musa, some months ago was in Niger to reestablish contact with the Nigerian authority, particularly about their involvement in the Multinational Joint Task Force. I think we need to go beyond that. We need at the political level to engage the Nigerians, engage them in such a way that we keep these people out, that allowing them to push them into our country unabated, and they start creating more serious problems for us. I think what we are running from is going to be more difficult for us to tackle, because The moment we have these terrorist groups moving in and out unchecked and operating within our territories, it becomes something that the whole country will be engulfed with terrorists and bandits all over the place. I think we need to do about that. Then one thing we need to check is that what are their sources? We must go beyond people thinking that they have so much arms. If you see the machine guns that they are playing with and the ammunition, these are expensive. Who are those financing them? Because terrorism financing is an international crime. And so we can go around everywhere to see that they are blocked. Even in Nigeria, the only time they mentioned those who are financing Boko Haram, that was all. Until today, what has happened to them, we don't even know. We must track terrorist financing. We must track their sponsors. There are those, no matter how highly placed they are here, national security does not respect anybody. Even if it's the president that is involved in sponsoring terrorist activities, it must be brought to his ideas that, look, your actions are this thing, but as the commander-in-chief, he has the sole responsibility of protecting and defending the Constitution and our territorial integrity. So it behoves on him to make sure that everybody in authority down the line must be reined in. And this idea of saying that state governors, when you see some of them behaving as if they are countries within their own, must stop. Because they definitely have to work within the national security context. If there is no country, there will be no governor. If there is no state right now, how many of them can move freely into those local governments that are under the control of those places? So it means they don't even have control over that area. So what are you? You're not more governing that area. It has become a space governed by a non-state actor. So definitely they must not be cowed to remain in the state capital.
All right. Thank you very much, General Temlong. And we've tracked the emergence, the origin, down to General Temlong's contribution. But let me introduce, before our next question, a guest from our Sokoto studio, Murtala Rufai, who is from the Usman Dan Fodio University in Sokoto. Thank you for joining us on the program. All right, can I now take you on straight up? You've had the benefit of listening to the other guests in the studio and outside of it. And some people have said that this could be a failure of intelligence from the beginning, not being able to determine the intention of these people when they came in. And then along the line, when they became radicalized, to borrow the word of Dr. Kabir Adamu, we were again not able to say, okay, this is where these people are headed. Is that what it is for you? A misdiagnosis of the situation and the intentions of the Lakurawa group?
Thank you very much, and good morning once again. My candid opinion about the Lakurawa, they came in as a radical and violent group with quote and unquote their own Islamic teachings and also their own Islamic ideology. And the unfortunate thing is that they don't have a very good understanding of the religion. Neither do they have an understanding of what exactly they want to do. As we speak, it is actually a very old threat about that started around 2017, 2018 here in some part of Sokoto states. They operate largely along the border. Today they have their presence and influence in about 10 local government areas across Sokoto and Kebbi states, and they are basically and fundamentally operating along Nigeria-Niger border areas. And the fact of the matter is, the locals will tell you, they preach religion, they preach their own ideology and their own teachings, but they seem not to even understand what they are actually into. And what do we see? We see people from different nationalities. They are mostly not Nigerians. They are from Niger, from Burkina Faso, from Benin, from Mali, and other parts of the Sahel. But the most interesting thing about it is that, again, they don't even understand the language of each other. That is very clear. And in some part of Sokoto, where they operate, in these local government areas that I'm going to mention, around Ilela, around Tangaza, Godu, Bale, Benji, Silami, down to some part of KB, particularly in Kangiwa, in Augi, and as we speak today, they are in some part of Argungu local government area. I think this is a threat, and a very fundamental threat, not only to Nigerian security, but to international international security, and also it is an international threat. In my own opinion, the fight against these people requires a robust and elaborate operation. We don't actually need to engage in cosmetic security operation in these places, because they have entrenched the communities, they have gotten the acceptance on the part of the communities. And what do we see? This same group today have created a large issue of ethnic polarization. The Hausa and the Fulani are increasingly becoming polarized because of the penetration and activities of this particular group. So in my own opinion, right from the onset, 2018, 2017, 2019, they came in as a radical and a violent group, and they've also been unleashing terror on these border communities. Initially, they came with the idea of saving the communities from the activities of the bandits. But what do we see today? They have taken over the ungoverned and undergoverned rural spaces across these two states that I'm talking about. And the expansion is increasing by the day. These are only areas that we know, and I'm very sure there are quite a number of areas that we don't know, that we are always trying to find out what is going on. Because the rural areas have submitted in some cases to them, not because they want to do that, but because they feel they don't have alternative governance, meaning these areas are ungoverned and undergoverned. And you can see traditional authorities, even yesterday I was relating with some of them, they said they have no option. You've seen people with military grade weapons. You wake up in the morning, you see them at night, you have no option other than to follow them. And that is what is actually going on in these rural areas. If you take, for instance, Augi local government, you find quite a number of the district. Kwaido taken over by these people, Shafazane taken over. Most of these areas are actually under the control of this terrorist group. And they are, just like I said earlier, non-Nigerians. But the possibility of our local people supporting and joining them and accepting their ideology is actually on the increase, because they collect taxes. Not only collect these taxes, when they impose the taxes, they collect these taxes in cash, and they will also direct you. We are in so-so-so location, at so-so-so point. We want so-so-so amount to be submitted or to be given to us. And at the end of the day, you will be the one to take the money. To the extent that in Arugungu, in Augi, in some part of Kangiwa, and even part of Sokoto states, around Tangaza, around Gudu and Silami, they have established a network in which this network serve as their agents. They impose levies on you, 10 heads of your cattle, they will say you pay 200 or 300,000. If you want to pay, we are in Juma Jimmy, we are in Giragiri, we are in Raka, they will mention locations. And you see people submitting, collecting this money, paying to them directly. They even know where to see them. They have their agents, the motorcyclists, that actually take individuals to some of these places. So in my own opinion, it is a very serious threat beyond our imagination. And we really need a robust international collaboration. It's not just about the issue of Nigeria anymore. Rather, it is the issue of getting the support of international communities to deal with this particular threat. It is imminent, it is increasing, it is expanding, and rural communities are crying day in, day out about the activities of this group.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rufai, for giving us a detailed insight into the activities of this new terrorist group. We'll be back to you later, but let's come back.
I had wanted him, which he didn't quite respond to, the place of intelligence in all of this. That was my major question to him, and I wanted him to say, was there failure of intelligence, and what role can intelligence play at this point in time? at this point in
Okay,
time.
okay, but maybe later, maybe let's
Failure of intelligence. I think the
Maybe
active failure of intelligence. I think fail- from the beginning of their activities in 2017, 2018, around Tangaza, around Gidamadi, Masallachi, Mogonho, the Nigerian security agencies are fully aware of what is going on. Because there was a very serious engagement between these people we call the Lakurawa and our security agencies. I think somewhere around 2019, 2020, they were dislodged from where they were operating and where they were occupying in, I think, somewhere around 2020 or 2021. They left. Now, what do we see? We see the second phase. The second phase is more radical, is more violent, is more entrenched than actually the first phase. And why do we know what we know? We know what we know because they have actually had an encounter with the communities, particularly in some part of Augi, specifically in Mera, where they killed 15 people. And these people that they killed were the local Hausa people that feel they have actually roasted our cattle. We really need to get our cattle back. That is when we know that these people are very powerful. But to be very frank and candid with you, there is actually a security and intelligence gap that needs to be filled urgently. My understanding of the whole issue is that for a very long period of time, we have not been doing what we're supposed to do. And today this threat is imminent, the failure is there, but we really need to act promptly and actively before it is actually getting too late. I know some people will say it is too late, but it is better done now than never. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rufai. It is better done now than never. But just like you have heard, he has given us the details, insight into the activities of these new terrorist group. But let's consider the strategies now being employed by the by the government to counter this new terrorist group. We are looking back. There was a peace summit in June. With practical actions were proposed to address this Northwest security crisis. Why do you think that the impact of this resolution and to address this issue is not working, is not yielding the impact yet? We have not felt the impact. What strategies do you think we need to counter the activities of this terrorist group?
Okay, I want to make it absolutely clear that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have enough strategies, enough laws on ground to address our security challenges. With regards to terrorism, there are two strategies and one law that I would refer to. The number one is the National Counterterrorism Strategy that was published in 2016, that, if I'm right, is currently being reviewed. Now, that strategy provides the framework for countering terrorism, just like the name suggests. And when it was launched in 2016, I think the philosophy behind it was that force will be the principal means to address terrorism. But then immediately after, there was a realization that there were underlying factors that allow terrorism to breed. So in 2017, another document called PCVE, the Policy Document on Countering Violent Extremism, was published. Now, the idea of that document was that soft power, things like socio-economic conditions, radicalization, name them, will now be introduced. And it has various elements under it. The third one is the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act, amended in 2022, which defined terrorism, defined acts and activities that contribute to terrorism, and more importantly, the punishment for anyone who engages in them. And also, very importantly, put up what was called a sanctions committee, which is chaired by the Attorney General of the Federation, with membership from different security organizations, if I'm right, about 14 of them. Now, the first strategy I mentioned, which is the National Counterterrorism Strategy, went ahead to create a coordinator counter-terrorism. And so today you have within the Office of the National Security Advisor, that office, a beautiful office with well-manned personnel from different organizations within the country. So my point is we don't need anything new. We already have all that is required. Now, all of these three documents are revolving around 5 things, and I'll quickly mention them. Number one, they aim to forestall terrorism. Anything that would be terroristic, they have provisions within them to forestall it from happening. 2016, we're in 2024, and we have a threat, just like Dr. Murtala has mentioned, that is not only imminent, that if we don't address, a new theater of war will be created, just like we have in the northeast. The second element within these three laws is to secure us. Because of time, I'm trying to reduce my words. Number three is to identify. In other words, anywhere anything terroristic emerges, those three laws were supposed to identify it. Then number four is to prevent. In other words, before any terroristic thing happens, take measures to prevent it. And then the last one is the implement component. So if you look at these 5 provisions within those 2 strategies and 1 law, why is it that in 2024, remember these things were introduced in 2016, in 2024 we now have this eminent threat. And I'll tell you the reason. And I think General Temlong did mention it. Accountability is largely missing within our security space. We need to introduce accountability. When all of these 3 elements these 3 quote-unquote strategies and the law were put forward, I don't think there was a strong monitoring and evaluation component within them that would have allowed us to periodically ask ourselves, where are we doing well? Are there gaps? If there are gaps, how do we correct it? If you allow me to do a poll, we are 4 here. How many of us have seen these 3 documents that I've mentioned? You are a journalist. If you pick the NAC test, National Counterterrorism Strategy, and the PCVE, the media is mentioned there. You are supposed to be the custodians of that document. The media are supposed to be the ones that would, through strategic communication, put it forward to Nigerians so that Nigerians can embrace it. The idea of the strategies and the law is that the market woman in Garki Market, in Silami, in Tangaza, if she sees a terroristic action, she should be able to call someone in security to say, I have seen something. But 10 years down the road, 8 years down the road rather, we haven't done that. So monitoring and evaluation is missing. The second reason why we're where we are.
Sorry to point you out. It was said in that report that in 2016, they noticed.
In fact, more than that, I'm being careful. I'm being careful because I'm in a media station. The police and AIG would confirm this. The police came out to say that the Lakurawas are benign. They are not malignant. A report from Sokoto State Police Command did say that. And of course, this was in 2017, 2018, thereabout. So, point I'm trying to make, the second point, we focused on the Northeast. And for obvious reasons, Jamaat al-Islam al-Dawati wal-Jihad was operational in the Northeast. Islamic State in West Africa province was operational. So the entire focus of these 2 strategies and the law moved kind of to the Northeast. If we had done our strategic security analysis, putting into consideration the feed from our intelligence agencies, the NIA, the DIA, the DSS, we would have known that the hotbed for terrorism was the Sahel. And if you look at the Sahel and the fact that at least 7 states, northern states in Nigeria are within the Sahel, then we would have known it was just a matter of time before this group start incursion into Nigeria, which means the same strategies that we are implementing in the Northeast would have implemented in the Northwest. First, like remember the 5 elements I mentioned: forestall, secure, identify, prevent, and implement. If we had done that in the North, we would have known when the Lakurawas were becoming radicalized. I differ a little bit with Dr. Murtala. Initially, if we go with the statement of the police, and I have no choice but to support that statement by the police, that they were not radicalized at the initial stages. Again, it is there. A simple Google search will produce that statement by the Sokoto State Police Command telling you that that group was not radicalized initially. I have no choice but to believe that statement. Today, they are radicalized.
It's because he's on ground there. That's why he says
beyond that, he's a historian. I'm an intelligence analyst. So the meaning of radicalization may differ.
They mean different things
So,
to
but
me.
let's not go into that argument. Let's rely with what.
But who is supposed to implement? When you
The-
talk
the-
about
the-
security
the Office of the
strategies,
National Security
and why does
Advisor.
it seem that these things are not implemented?
The Office of National Security Advisor, like I told you, under NAC test, you have a coordinator, counter-terrorism. Today you have a substantive general who is heading that office. The idea is to galvanize us as Nigerians. When they say security is really by the people, the idea is bring everybody on board. That's why he's a coordinator. He's new in that office, so I'm not kind of putting the responsibility on him.
It's not the individual, it's the office.
It's the office, exactly. And the continuity that was envisaged when the entire NAC test was created, 2016. But the good thing is that it's due for review. I do hope that an M&E strategy will be implemented where, in fact, a simple SWOT analysis. What did we do well with the previous one? What didn't do well? How do we make sure that the average Nigerian... In fact, what even shocked me, I'm being careful, I'm on NTA, what shocked me is our governors. You will be surprised that if you invite governors, not many of them even know of the existence of this document that I've mentioned.
Because you're talking about governors, now I'm going to ask Ejab Tuyaro, retired. There was a peace and security summit in June in the Northwest. I'm not sure, it looks like you were at that summit. What was then discussed? What was found? And what was it, just a jamboree? Because that's what some people have called it.
Dr. Kebir was there too.
Okay.
Were you not there? As somebody said in the Senate last time, you say you were there and I was not there, but he was there.
But
in any case, what I'm trying to say is that, jokes apart, many things were said in ways and manners similar to what we're saying. You know, as Nigerians, we seldom run out of ideas. You know, and I know. Coordinating and translating these ideas to action seems, in my view, that is always
The problem.
our major problem. And the moment we correct it, the better for us, the better for fatherland. There's no way you can have a neighbor of over 1,000 kilometer land boundary and you are not in amity with that neighbor. You're only looking for the doomsday. We in West Africa were 16 countries. But of the 16 of us, we have the single stretch of largest border with a Sahelian neighbor. That alone has serious national security implication. Whether the form of government or the form of behavior in our neighbor's house contradicts our personal convenience, for our strategic survival, we must be in amity with that neighbor. That's the point I'm making. If you look at the Americans, there are some countries that they are strategic neighbors, even though they are not geographically contiguous. But they are strategic. Like what they used to teach us in ABU in the early 80s, that South Africa was the strategic neighbor of Nigeria during the liberation struggle. Even though we have a distance of over 6,000 kilometers in terms of land connectivity, because our interests and their own, at that time they were struggling, was intertwined. So we consider them to be strategic neighbors. I will have to work with them so that that interest will be achieved. Within the context of ECOWAS, we were the founding fathers. We're having the secretariat here in Asokoro. We are the frontline state in Africa. But as of today, with all truism, are we really the bonding apparatus of ECOWAS ideals now?
At least we cheer it.
I said bonding ideals is different from chairmanship. Bonding ideals is to say, are we really acting in a way to make all the other 15 ECOWAS states to feel subordinated, to feel aligned with us militarily, economically, psychologically, intelligently, or otherwise? We form ECOWAS because we believe that in West Africa, we Nigerians, we have about 60% stake in the human activity, the whole of West Africa. And And that is why our earlier founding fathers of our country believed that we should use ECOWAS to advance our national security interest, our national economic interest, our national cultural interest. Have we really maximized it? Now, within that ECOWAS we home, 4 or 5 cardinal members in the Sahel, they have now backward marched from ECOWAS. This backward march has a lot of implication on us. And part of it is what we are seeing physically now. Traversing terrorists in the Sahel, it must be stopped. And it cannot be stopped in a unilateral manner. We can't act in silos and give effect to securing it. We must have partnership, bilateral, multilateral, ECOWAS platform.
I agree with
Somebody said earlier from Sokoto or elsewhere that in 2017, they came, they retreated, and they came back. That's to say they retreated into the Sahel, and they came back.
I agree with you that it has to stop, but we just have to stop at this point
Because
just so that we take a break. We are not stopping you.
Thank you, sir.
We'll go on a break, and when we return,
Thank
the
you.
conversation will continue. Please stay with us.
Well, thanks for staying with us. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We're still discussing, tackling this new terrorist group. Now let's go to Jos, where we have General Temlong. And from the discussion here, it's obvious that our security agencies need international cooperation. And what role, let's now consider the role that global intelligence, intelligence sharing can play in this, in disrupting terrorist network, especially how can regional organizations such as ECOWAS, for instance, help Nigeria, support Nigeria in counter-terrorism?
Well, thank you very much. Terrorism already is an international crime against humanity. So the sharing of intelligence on terrorism or terrorist activities is an international affair. But you see, the important thing is not just the sharing of intelligence, because what Dr. Kabir said about the policy documents that we have, it's quite unfortunate that those who are supposed to operate them do not even know of their existence. I'll sure bet my pension for that. So the issue of governance itself is at the core of these things, because governance at the state, governance at the local levels, they are the core. You see, these things started at that level. And if governance was actually up and doing, and then they knew what they were doing, there are certain measures that they can even take at community levels to be able to dislodge these people or distance themselves before they go into a very big and strong and monstrous organization. So I think we need to do that. If you look at almost all the states that have conducted what they call local government elections, the outcome of it is as good as what you think it is, because all the parties that are in power in those states installed local government chairmen and councillors that they were. And so are they actually this thing? But do these local government chairmen, are they accountable to the citizens, or they are accountable to the governors? Now that they are there, do they even know about these policy documents that are available? How do they build the capacity of the communities to be able to know, identify, to forestall, to report? What are the reporting lines? Apart from the ones that Dr. Kabir mentioned, you have the national security policy strategy. You have the national defense policy, which talks about the citizens' involvement in national defense and the rest. So what are those things to that extent? It's not just we coming here. Yes, we talk about them every day. I know Dr. Kabir is passionate about them. I've been talking about them too, but I think we are just beating about, because the whole thing is that, is it going down the line? Are they serious about them? At the state level, you don't even have a national security or a state security staff. They rely on the heads of the security agencies that are posted there. A civil servant is posted as the PAMSEC security. Some states now have started having what they call security advisor, but what staff do they have? How do they interact with those security agencies? Is there any analysis that they're able to subject and do, and how, to what extent do they even have access to governors? At the local government level, do they have anything like that? So you see, we must think of replicating what are this at the center to be able to tackle this situation at the government at those levels. So I think those are the most important thing. No matter the intelligence you get and you pass them down, they are not being able to use them because they are not even trained. They don't have the capacity to use them. So I think we need beyond that, because that's why you found that whenever you have the kinetic efforts having successes, the soft power components are not complementing the kinetic efforts. And in fact, the whole thing is supposed to be a soft power component, the governance issues. The kinetic is just there to say, look, stop, do this, and then the soft power takes over. Governance issues. So I think that's this thing. But the important thing, like the AIG did mention, which I did mention too, is that, look, what is our national interest? What is our strategic interest with these countries? America will go to war to defend democracy. But America has the best of relations with the Arab or Gulf states, which are not democracies. What is in their own national interest? So what is our own destiny that we have neighbors that are contiguous to us, and that we must try and bring them back into the ECOWAS fold? Because keeping them outside, allowing them to drift outside of the ECOWAS fold is not in our own national security interest, especially Nigeria, which has acted as a hegemon and has projected power to Liberia and Sierra Leone to be able to stop the domino effect of the crisis from spilling into the other West African states and making Nigeria itself untenable. So what do we do now? I think we need to reevaluate our strategy. We need to reevaluate our stand on these other countries to see how we can get them back into the fold. It has to be a very serious, and Nigeria must take the lead. Like we know, it is Nigeria that started the ECOWAS thing along with Togo. Togo doesn't have the clout like Nigeria. And Nigeria has also been seen as the hegemon in the area. We provide the headquarters, we provide all this, and I think we will be the biggest losers when we allow these people to go the way they want to go. So.
All right, General Temlong, we thank you very much for your contribution. Let me quickly get back to Sokoto, where we have Dr. Rufai. And I just want to, we've talked a lot about the issues, what led to it, how it emerged, but where do we go from here? Is the solution diplomatic? Is it military, or is it both?
Thank you very much. I think the solution requires both the kinetic and the non-kinetic aspects. At the moment, communities, just like I said earlier, are increasingly becoming polarized with the issue of mistrust and distrust along the border. What is far more important now is the issue of community reconciliation, finding the way of actually bringing these communities together, because it is now reinventing the idea of the farmer-herder dispute or the farmer-herder conflict that we know. The Hausa people along this particular border point accusing fingers on the pastoral communities or the Fulani that they are responsible, they are agents of this terrorist group. And I think that is something that needs to be stopped actually very urgently, or else we are actually going to see a new wave of the farmer-herder conflict, because this issue of the Lakurawa, there is the theory and the idea that they were invited, And when they came in, they actually did what they did with the support of the local pastoralists. And today, we've seen them also engaging and recruiting their own local informants that provide them with local and also village intelligence. So what is important now is to conduct a deeper threat analysis of this particular quote and unquote new group, because it is identified as a new group. But I feel a boy of 8, you can't call him a baby boy anymore. But the issue actually, and the fact also remains that we need to have this idea of buying in and keying in of rural and the local communities over what we are doing. Because a portion or a fraction of the local communities in the affected areas have no faith. I'm sorry to use the word issue of having no faith on the Nigerian security system or on the Nigerian states, simply because of the idea of this ungoverned and undergoverned spaces. So all we really need to do now is to go into a massive campaign, bringing back these communities, let them know the impact of what they are doing, let them also see the threats of this idea of creating a state within a state. Then looking at the kinetic approach, there is no way we are going to have a successful kinetic operations without the buy-in in of the locals. Because initially, these people were living in the forest, but we have seen them gradually pushing into communities. And the same terrorist group that we're talking about have this sense of the issue of the collateral damage. And on that basis, they get closer to communities, infuse into the communities, so as in an event of air raid and air strike, or the air warfare, for instance, they will increase the rate of the collateral damage. In other words, both kinetic and the non-kinetic approach needs to be harmonized and needs to be done concurrently. At the moment, what we need is intelligence. And for us to get this intelligence, in my opinion, we really need to go underground. We need to get the people that are directly involved, to get the names, the locations, as well as the nature and pattern of these activities. Our attention, just like I said earlier, is focused on Sokoto and Kebbi. But believe in me, the threat is far beyond these 10 LGAs that we talk about. Why is it an issue in these LGAs? Is because of the recent happenings. But I also have the belief that similar activities and the presence of this group, for instance, is actually going on in other places that is still unknown. So the sooner we identify the gravity of this threat and we address it in the both kinetic and the non-kinetic manner, I think the better for us. And not only that, just like Dr. Kabir has actually mentioned and other speakers, I feel what is important is getting the buy-in of our immediate neighbor, Niger Republic. Because communities along this border are now moving to pass their nights, sleep in their immediate neighbor in the Niger Republic. Simply because of what? Simply because of the threat of the Lakurawa. You see a kilometer difference between Nigerian side and Nigerian side. But on the Nigerian side, you trek down to Niger, you sleep there, you pass your night comfortably, and then if you come back to Nigeria, what do you see? You see the threats of this Lakurawa. In these communities, we've seen pockets of banditry, but the Lakurawa have succeeded in dealing with the bandits. But my major concern here is the dividing line between the Lakurawa and the bandit is very thin. In an event of aggressive military operations, that is within the kinetic context, we expect an alliance, we expect a collaboration, and we expect synergy between some of these bandit groups and also this terrorist group. More so, they share a lot of things in common in terms of language, in terms of operational strategy, in terms of even issues around sharing of intelligence. I think what is important in terms of the solution is now win the hearts and the minds of the locals, because there is no way we are going to succeed in the kinetic approach or operations without the locals. And then these locals are gradually becoming inclined and in support of this terrorist group, unless and until we deal with this this issue, this division, this mistrust, this distrust, and the issue of misinformation and disinformation, I don't think we are going to get it right.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rufai, for your submission there. So how, let's come back to Dr. Kabil now. Getting the local engaged in this fight against this new terrorist group. Earlier on, when you were talking about these different strategies, you mentioned the role of education. Many of us don't know. We don't know. We are not educated. We don't know how to even go about all these things. So, how can education and economic empowerment help, especially the local communities, in this fight against this terrorist group?
Okay, with the little time at my disposal, I'll quickly mention that earlier on you asked me about the conference in Katsina,
Yes,
on the northwest. All these issues were identified.
Okay.
The military component and then the soft component, socio-economic conditions, education, population, name them, environmental, of course climate change and all of that. So these are issues that have to be addressed. They all, in one way or the other, impact the communities. I've had the misfortune, I would even say, of visiting our border areas. There is a place in Sokoto, I've forgotten the name of that local government, Kebi, I think, that shares borders with three countries, Niger, Benin Republic. In fact, you are in that community. On the one hand, you see Benin Republic, on the other hand, you see Niger, and then, of course, Nigeria. So in such a community where there is no governance, no schools, no water, no electricity. Imagine a situation where a terrorist group now comes to offer them ₦1 million. I mean, they will go for that. So I don't want to be simplistic and saying it's just being on the radio and TV where you educate. No, we need more than that. Let's identify their traditional rulers. In most of these local governments that were identified by Dr. Murtala, civilian administration has been crippled. Traditional rulers are no longer effective. So let's identify and find a way, just like it happened in Borno State, where the state had to come in to support traditional rulers so that their authority is reinstalled. Let's start with that. And then, of course, through that, we can now start gathering intelligence. We need to know the leadership of this group. We need to know how they are funded. We need to know their weapons acquisition strategies. We need to know the routes they are using, and then we'll go. I'm a bit worried. This morning in one of the international radio stations, the Minister of Defense granted an interview, and he stated categorically that a military operation is about to commence. Now, our advice to him is that nothing wrong with a military operation. Your strategy is first to stem the violence, then reduce conflict, and then socio-economic development. Now, you can only do that, and that's my advice to the Minister of Defense, to the Chief of Defense Staff. If they are envisaging an operation, they must handhold Niger. Niger, they need to reach out to Niger so that a simultaneous operation is also conducted in Niger. If these guys are going to run either into us or away from us. So we must make sure Niger is on board and Niger also holds them. And if there is an international collaborator, which is likely the case, I mean, the weapon that these guys are carrying are not weapons you just go and pick in the market. So we need to identify who that is and use multilateral channels to make sure that pressure is put on that person who is arming these guys.
All right, Dr. Kabiadam, thank you very much. Ejab Yaro retired. The final 2 minutes, your closing thoughts.
Thank you. It is imperative that implementation of some of the ideals we put across is urgent. We are into this because we want to contribute our own quota to national security development. And in as much as we take analytical perspectives with experiential background into discourse, it is important that the relevant policy organs of the state should take immediate action with respect to some of the issues we are canvassing. Because it is to the interest of all of us that will preserve our country, and it is important that without this country being at peace with itself, we individually cannot function.
All right.
We must take cognizance of the fact that This country was bequeathed to us by our forebearers in a complete and stable state. And during our own generational existence, we must add value to that tranquil state apparatus that we inherited. That's the much we can do
All right.
for our country at the moment.
AIG Abutuyaro retired. Retired AIG Zone 13, former CP Edo, Zamfara, and Imo State CP Federal Operations Commander, Counter-Terrorism Training School, Port Harcourt. We thank you for your time and thoughts on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Let me also thank Dr. Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Expert. Always a pleasure having you at the program. Thank you for your contributions.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for having
And
me.
let's cross over to Jos, where we are joined by General John Temlong, First Commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force and former President, Alumni Association of National Defense College. Security consultant, you are also. We thank you very much for always finding time to join us and contributing on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And by no means the least, let me thank Dr. Motala Ahmed Rufai, Department of History and International Studies at the Usman Danfodio University in Sokoto. Thank you for bringing the fire. We appreciate your time and thoughts on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's Good Morning Nigeria. We thank you very much for watching. Let's do this again tomorrow. I am Victor Azu.
And I am Ademola Ade. Be safe and enjoy the rest of your day.